Hello and welcome to the NIGP webinar, Dealing with Anxiety and Depression, presented by Steve Gordon, Norma Hall, and Darren Matthews. Steve, a 45-year veteran in the public procurement arena, has devoted his career to advancing the practice of public procurement. The 2002 president of NIGP, Steve received the Albert H. Hall Award in 2006. In retirement, Steve volunteers to assist those who struggle with mental illness and loneliness. Norma is a 40-year veteran of state government procurement who has served the public procurement community as a pioneering public procurement practitioner and as an effective instructor, speaker, consultant, mentor, and coach. Skilled in budgeting, sourcing, negotiations, contract management, and many other areas, Hall was the 2005 president of NIGP and was awarded NIGP's Albert H. Hall Award in 2009. Darren has over 25 years of procurement management experience in state and local government, higher education, and private industry. Darren, who is a master instructor for NIGP, served as the NIGP president in 2007 and received the Institute's Albert H. Hall Award in 2012. He is currently director for Negrometrics, an international leader in digital procurement and contract management. If at any time during the webinar you need technical assistance, please let us know in the Q&A box. During the presentation, you may submit questions to the Q&A box on your screen, and we will take them during specified parts of the presentation. Steve, would you like to go ahead and get us started?
I'd be delighted to, Justin. Thank you so much for that, for the good introduction. So, everyone, Norma and Darren and I are delighted to be with you today, and we're grateful for your presence. We're looking forward to sharing, some ideas and thoughts and experiences and some resource information with you today that we hope will be very helpful for you. We're not just doing this as a song and dance. You're going to find as we go through our presentation that this is going to be a little bit different from other webinars that you have attended, because we're going to share some very personal information about ourselves with you. And there's a reason for that. And I think that reason will be very clear as we go through. So Norma and Darren, if you guys are ready, let's get rolling.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Sounds good, Steve. Do you recall, Steve, to your point about this not being a typical topic, when Norma, yourself and me were talking about this early on and talking to Justin at NIGP, we had a question about the topic. Is this is not a typical procurement topic? Our colleagues ready to talk about it? And I think with the numbers I'm seeing here, 250 and growing, that it is the right topic, Steve.
And that is so good to see, isn't it, Darren? It really is. And just for those of you who can see how gray my hair is, and of course, Norma, you look like you're 25, there, but and Darren, you look good too. But Norma and Darren and I have known one another for a very long time. So the way we're going to do this webinar today, as you have already witnessed, is that it's essentially going to be a conversation among ourselves. We all three of us know one another very well. So hopefully you'll feel like you're sitting in on a conversation that when you ask your questions, you can join in. And that's the way we want to do this today. So let's get rolling a little bit with the content. Now we're assuming that those of you who are out there fall into three categories. There may be more, but you may be struggling with anxiety disorder or depression. You may know someone who is doing that, and you may be seeking insights into what you should do for themselves or for others, for yourself, I mean, and always also things like how do we relate to people who are struggling with anxiety and with depression. We want to provide a disclaimer here, and to be very, very clear about this, that none of us are, nor do we pretend to be psychiatrists or any other type of medical doctor. We are going to be sharing with you from our experiences and with anxiety, with depression. Hopefully that it will be helpful to you. But do not think that we're psychiatrists, any other type of medical doctor, or that we are licensed counselors of any type or kind, because we are not. And so don't consider anything we say as advice. I know that sounds like something the lawyer would tell us to say, but we thought of that on our own. So, but our purposes here today fall into two categories. First, to create awareness and to point you to some good resources. Norma, Darren, is there anything you guys would jump in and say at this time, or do we need to keep rolling?
Steve, I would just add, as we get going with this conversation, you mentioned that Norma, yourself, and Darren go way back, and you are both individuals that I look up to a great deal, and not just on the procurement front, but on a personal level. So I just feel privileged to have this conversation. When I started at NIGP and leadership, you and Norma were very established, and as I recall at the meetings, you would run them, and I would get the coffee.
I think you're overstating that just a little bit, Darren. You know, you have done so much for our profession, and you continue to do so. And so, you know, speaking on behalf of Norma and myself, we're just delighted to have you here with us. So, so thank you for that. Norma, anything at this point?
Not right now, but I think this is a great forum for us to talk about this issue, and I'm very happy that individuals see that there's a need to have this presentation.
Good. All right, well, this is our plan, and we all know what happens to plans, but we're going to do, the three of us are going to do the best we can to stick to this plans. We're going to give you some definitions. We're going to share our learning objectives for you. You know, we have to do that, all of us being all three of us having been trainers for so long. But I'm also going to throw in a couple of behavioral outcomes that are 2 or 3 or 4 maybe behavioral outcomes that we are hoping that we will also achieve today. We're going to ask you to respond to 4 polling questions, and we're not doing that just for the fun of it or to kill time, because these questions are going to be something that we will very much rely on as we go through our presentation. And Norma and Darren, if for some reason I'm not able to see those things, can you just be sure to let me know what's on them, okay? Each of us is going to tell our individual stories, and but as you've already seen, it's very likely that the other 2 will chime in, so don't be surprised at that. And so that's just how we're going to work it. You're going to see a questions and comments slide periodically. So that will be your opportunity to ask questions, make comments. And you know, unfortunately, we can't take on this platform, we can't take oral questions, but that will be the way we will get your questions, and we will, of course, respond to them verbally. We are going to try to get to 2 or 3 comments or questions at each interval. You know, don't feel like you have to wait until those slides pop up, though. You know, submit your questions at any time, and then we'll, you know, and Justin will pull them out of the queue for us. So we'll do that. And at the end, time permitting, we'll try to get to as many of the questions that remain in comments as time permits. And afterwards, we encourage you, not only can you, but we encourage you to email any questions that we were not able to get to any of us or to all of us. And so again, just hold on for the ride. Here are the definitions. Here's what anxiety is. Now, I think all of us have felt anxiety at times. We're human, and we'd have to be a rock if we didn't feel that. But when we say anxiety, we're really talking about anxiety disorders, which is, as you can see from the italics on the screen, they're recurring, intrusive thoughts or concerns. And we're going to talk more about anxiety, but not only does anxiety have you know, mental or psychological dimensions, it all has physical dimensions as well. Mm-hmm. And look over there in that box. It's the most common mental health condition in the United States, and it's also, I think, or close to the top in Canada as well. So anxiety is not a trivial subject, and it literally can debilitate us, whether at home or at work or anywhere for that matter.
Steve, I'll throw in a couple of examples that are procurement related when I've experienced anxiety. Job interview, even with certification, the symptoms you see, they're sweating, trembling, rapid heartbeat. I could feel that. Definitely a couple times I've been to court on procurement disputes, experienced anxiety, and I'm not sure I really had the tools to deal with it at the time.
Yes, and that's what I think, Darren, and that's a very good point. I think all three of us wish we had the knowledge and the tools to be able to deal with these things earlier in our life. And I'm going to talk about a few of those examples too, not only about myself, but about, in my case, employees. So again, we're just delighted you're here, and we're going to keep going here. And the other topic in the title is depression. And it's more than just sadness. And people think you're just sad. There's so many different types of depression, and I won't bore you with the whole list of those right now, but just know that it comes in all, just so many varieties. And this second bullet talks about how you can spot when somebody may have, these are some of the symptoms of depression. And it's not good. It's just not good. I can speak from experience. And it's the most common mental disorder. Anxiety is a condition and a disorder. I'm not a doctor. Don't ask me to distinguish those things. But the good news about depression is that depression is treatable. Now, I think it's in about 80 to 85, maybe 90% of the time. And it can be treated through therapy and medication to help, make sure you get better. You see this, in this slide, you see the term major depressive episodes. And episodes is a metric that people in public health use to track depression. And so essentially my layman's definition is you have to have been diagnosed as having been depressed for 2 weeks to count as being depressed. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that you are not depressed if you, even for a day or 2 or 3 or 4, and no matter, all the way up to 2 weeks. But that's, for statistical purposes, this is the metric, major depressive episodes, 2 weeks with a diagnosis. And you can see the numbers there. We touched on maybe 1 or 2 of these at the beginning. Look at that. It's 7.1 of all adults experience depression during the course of a year, and this was in 2017. And look at here, it's depression is more frequent among adult females than males. And I don't think the third bullet will surprise you that 18 to 25 is the most frequently occurring age category. But don't worry there. I actually do worry, but be aware, I should say, that depression is, as we all know, is high among teenagers. It can be high in middle age, and it can occur at any time. The prevalence among 2 races, 2 people who report that they are descended from 2 or more races was surprising to me, but I thought that was worth noting. And you can see the rest of those statistics there. I'll quit reading those, but Darren, Norma, any comments on this?
Well, Steve, I know we'll talk about resources a bit later, and we'll leave our attendees with some resources. to reach out for assistance. But the one that jumps out to me is the young adults, the 18 to 25 year range, which shouldn't be surprising when we look around. But I think what is surprising is at times the lack of resources for this age group. Folks like me tend to think, well, it's an older person's tendency to be depressed. And, young people have everything going for them. Why would they be depressed? But Dana and I do some work with AIM, which is a youth mental health organization, excuse me, in Carmel, Monterey area that fund a lot of research in this area. So I think this is improving an area, but I think we need more resources for this particular age group.
Yes, indeed. And as we're going to point out here, there needs to be greater awareness of the resources that are out there. So let's keep drilling here. Norma?
Okay. About 11% men and 16% of women in Canada will experience major depression in the course of their lives. And that statistic is about the same. It's a little bit higher, actually, in the United States. So I know that depression is very real from experience, and it can severely have a negative effect on what you do in your daily life.
Okay. Darren?
Sure. As far as the learning objectives, as Steve mentioned, as trainers, we have to have this slide. But we do want to share with you what we'd like to get out of our session today for all of us. First of all, explain why it's essential and recognize that frequently occurring anxiety and severe and prolonged depression, we have to take it seriously. I think we all know that, but let's keep that in mind. Also discuss how frequently occurring anxiety and depression can manifest themselves if we don't treat it, if we don't seek help. Also tell individuals who struggle with these type of conditions of anxiety and depression, they can obtain assistance and support. I think that's a major takeaway, Norma, if I were looking at this presentation, knowing the resources, because I have to say in the past, I have not been aware, I have not made myself aware, and therefore I couldn't share information. And also apply what's learned in the webinar to help yourself, help others, help those that you love, those in your community and your family. And finally, work with others to help destigmatize these conditions of anxiety and depression. Let's talk about them. I think that's a healthy first step.
Norma, you got anything you want to add to that?
No, I would just like to say that the main thing is that we need to be in tune with other individuals that are around us to try and detect when this might be a factor in their lives, because a lot of people try to hide it, and because of the stigmatism. So it's not anything to be ashamed of, for one thing, and the most important thing that we can do is be there to support others and to help them get the help they need.
Well, and that's so good what both of you said. Just my way of just saying it, condensing these into 4 areas would be: we want to encourage you to get help and assistance if you need it, to protect and maintain your mental health, encourage others who need help and assistance to get it, and treat others who struggle with mental illness with dignity and respect. And this is an area, that Darren, you and Norma have mentioned how you've grown in your knowledge and awareness in this area over the years. There's so many things that I wish I had been aware of, 20, 30 years ago.
For sure.
Well, Justin, we're ready for our polling questions, I think.
So Norma, I know we can't participate in the poll, but I'm checking it off in my head.
Me too.
And we'll give everybody about 10 more seconds to get the response in. And here are the results. Steve, hopefully you can see this.
I can see it. It's great. And it's just fine. Wow. So, essentially 7 out of 10 of us here today have struggled with anxiety and depression. Wow. And over half of us have relatives who have done the same. Nearly 40% of us have a friend or acquaintance. Look down here at the workplace, someone I work with, 20, about a fourth, and only 5%, bless you, you have had no experience with this. And of course, we know from experience from all having worked in public procurement that public procurement is a stress-free workplace. And you're saying not the one you knew, huh, Norma? Okay.
Not the one I knew.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move on. Justin.
So Steve, at different times in my life, I would answer this differently. I'll talk a little bit later about the assistance sought, because I do believe this is an important area.
It's a critical area, sure is.
And we'll give about 10 more seconds for this one. And here are results.
Well, nearly half of you have 45%. That's good. And hopefully by the time we get through with this call today, all of you will go after help. And I say help, I mean support, assistance. There's so much, we'll talk about this later, but there's so much support and assistance out there. So Norma, Darren, any comments on this one?
No, I think the results are what I thought they probably would be.
Okay.
Yeah, same with me, Norma. And I think encouraging that, nearly half have sought assistance. And then even the previous slide, the 5% haven't experienced anxiety or depression. How great is it to have them participating with us, because they can serve as a resource for others.
Absolutely. Okay, Justin, we're ready for our next one.
We'll give everybody about 10 more seconds. And here are results.
Family in a third of the cases. Somebody outside the family, 15. Okay. We don't seem to be, people don't, if we've had issues, people around us at work, this would indicate they aren't noticing, or at least they aren't acting. And of course, the next one is pretty low too. And I know from my experience that the one about people with whom you work, that's true. And perhaps, I don't know, Norma, you and Darren may have some thoughts on this, but I think at the time when I had my 2 events, I think people were, it was probably some combination of they didn't know what to do. they were reluctant to get involved, or any number of other factors, because I know it was pretty obvious. I know when I look back, and I've talked to my colleagues, it was pretty obvious at the time. Anything on that, guys?
I agree with you, Steve. I think that people at work either don't want to recognize it or don't have the ability to recognize it. And I think more that it's they don't have the ability to recognize it, because I know that I was in that place at one time with employees not recognizing that they probably needed some kind of assistance at that time. But knowing what I know now and having gone through that, I have a whole different perspective on that.
Yeah, I appreciate your comments, Norma. I have a different, perspective as well. I haven't experienced things at this point in life that I, as we mentioned, wish I knew earlier. I'd love to see the numbers creep up in the future, so that colleagues at work and particularly family members can reach out and offer assistance. At least I hope that I can say that.
Yeah. And guys, this is the last polling question. I know you're thankful, but this is the last one.
And Steve, I see a lot of good comments and back and forth going on in the chat.
Good.
Folks helping each other. That's what it's all about.
That's it. We talk about relationships so much in procurement. That's what this is, people helping people.
We'll give everybody about 5 more seconds. And here are results.
Very helpful in about a quarter of the cases. Helpful, adequate moves. So nobody, only 2%, scored below at least adequate. And I'll tell you just right now, my experience was mixed. What about yours, Norma?
Mine actually, I feel like was adequate, and a lot of that wasn't just for it was for my doctor and for the information that he gave me. And so I think that he was very adequate in diagnosing me. I would almost say very helpful on this one, because you look at yourself in one lens and somebody else will look at you in another lens, and somebody that's known you for a long time can look at you and determine, hey, there's something not right here.
Yeah.
So that was very, very helpful for me, but certainly adequate.
Well, and as you say that, Norma, I probably would select a choice that's not here. I'd probably say helpful and mixed. I can't choose that because I remember when I, just a few weeks prior to my first, I guess people call it breakdown. Let's go ahead and use the word events, the more clinical word. My personal physician at the time said, you're just going through a rough patch, so it turned out I was going through a little bit more than that. So that's why I would have to go back and say mixed, because it was not a good start. But most of the care that I have received since then, has just been outstanding.
So Norma, I would probably rate mine as helpful as well, maybe the number 4. I think it could have been higher, but I think my willingness to accept help was probably what was, adequate or maybe poor.
Okay. All right. Well, Norma, we're on to your story now.
All right. Well, one of the things that I'd like to mention is life stressors. And, when you're dealing with one issue, that's could be pretty severe in itself. But when you have multiple stressors that are piling up on you, and they've been like that for years, at some point in time, something has to happen. Either you're going to break, or you're going to find someone that's going to help you with that goal of getting better. And when I first started, my first issue with anxiety, where it was something that I had to have help for. I had anxiety all through the years, and anyone that is in a management position in procurement probably has had some kind of anxiety from different projects at work, different situations at work, legal situations like Darren had mentioned earlier. So, there's so many different things that can bring those life stressors to you, and life stressors for everyone are not always all the same. But in 2013, it was kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back for me. I had been having a major crisis at work that involved a contract where a contractor had actually stole $2.5 million. And it was a contract that was being managed through my office. And as you can imagine, the stress from that itself at that time was major. And for the 5 years leading up to that, my mother had been diagnosed with dementia and put in a nursing home. And she was in Charleston and I was in Columbia. So for those of you that don't know the distance, it's like a 2-hour drive. So I was taking care of her long distance in the nursing home where she was at in Charleston with very little help from family, if any. And then in 2013, I actually got to bring her to Columbia, but she was only here for not even 2 months and then passed away. So she was in hospice. I was dealing with her in hospice in the hospital, and she had dementia and a lot of other issues. So those people that know someone with dementia know how critical it is to be able to deal effectively with those individuals. And that is a huge stressor for an individual. And then there was issues with an employee at work at the same time and resulted in termination of that employee when I felt like maybe the employee didn't need to be terminated, but was given instructions from higher up the chain that the employee had to be terminated. So I was dealing with the stress of that, feeling bad for the employee, not thinking that management was handling the situation, the way that I thought it should be held and all that. And then with my mother's death in September. When she died, that was the straw that broke the camel's back. I felt like I was holding myself together. It was tough and there was a lot of anxiety. But with my mom's death, I thought it was going to be strong. I'm usually a very strong person. And I kept thinking, okay, I'm going to get through this. I've taken care of her all these years. She's now in a place where there's no more pain or anxiety, no more pain for her, and that she's happy and all of that. But I couldn't help thinking about what more could I have done for her? And there really wasn't a whole lot more that I could have done than what I did. But her death just really took a toll on me that I didn't expect. It was just tremendous. And I would be driving down the road and start crying so hard I'd have to pull off the side of the road. And I'm not just thinking about my mom. And so that was a big deal for me. And if you think about all the other stressors, you'd think, okay, well, why was that stressor that was not as much as the major crisis at work, the one that kind of did it for me? And at the time, when I noticed I was going through all these changes, I made an appointment with my doctor, and I went into his office, and he asked me what was happening and all that. And when I told him everything, I said, this is not me. And he said, you're right, that isn't you, because he knew what a strong person I had always been. And so he said, well, I have to ask you this one question. And I said, oh, okay. And he said, are you suicidal? And, I kind of laughed out at him, and I thought, if I'm suicidal, why am I here trying to seek help? But you know what? There are suicidal people that may be reaching out to others, not necessarily, someone that is in the medical profession, but someone that can take them to that level or get them to someone that's in the medical profession. So anyway, but he was the one who got me started on anxiety medicine, which I'm still on. And I am proud that I'm still on that medicine because it helps me function. And I know what it's doing with me, and it's helping me deal with a lot of anxieties that I have. So one of the things is to recognize the life issues that are affected by anxiety. And when you have one that you're dealing with, that's not so bad. Maybe you can handle that one. But when they start piling up and piling up, that might be the time that you want to think, hey, what is this doing to me mentally? How am I handling things? Am I handling things the way that I normally would? Or is this affecting me so much that I can't focus? I can't concentrate. I can't do things that I normally do. So seeking that medical assistance to me was the biggest thing and the biggest plus for me at that time. And I was so glad that I did that. David, Steve or Darren?
Okay, on your slide. Okay, Norma, when did you have your fall? You know, when did that occur?
Oh, the fall when I when I fell in the street in San Diego.
That one, and when you were teaching, I think you were presenting.
Oh, I was teaching. Yeah. I was actually at a conference in 2010, and I fell and broke my shoulder. And I was dealing with that pain in my shoulder for 5 years. So, you know, it was dealing with that pain from 2010 until 2015 when I had my shoulder replaced. So I was always in constant pain. So that was just a given. I was just always in constant pain. So it was all of this stuff on top of that. Thanks for asking that, Steve. I had completely let that slip my mind.
Well, you probably just built a wall around it because it was awful. I know when it happened, and I remember how much pain you were in. Yeah. Darren, you have anything you want to add there?
Just to appreciate your story, first of all, Norma. Hopefully we can get together sometime and talk about our great moms. But I remember the shoulder getting injured, and I just want to let our audience know that Steve and Norma and I served on the NIGP board, and sometimes the board meetings would get a little crazy, but normally didn't, you know, result in that type of injury or hospitalization. But
yeah, I'm sure the people listening would be glad to know that. So that's
They were
good.
mostly friendly.
They were mostly friendly. Every once in a while, there were a few hard looks, but that's about as far as it went. All right, Norma, here's your second slide.
Okay. So then I got over that, and I thought things were going pretty good and all. And so in 2015, I went to work at DOT. I left the Budget and Control Board, which is now the State Fiscal Accountability Authority, and went back to DOT, where I had been the Director of Procurement and was the CPO or Director of Procurement again. During that time, so there was a job change in 2015. My stepmother committed suicide in 2016 at her house with my dad there. And dealing with that with him, you know, when you have an older adult that you're dealing with, the love of their, you know, life, that they've just committed suicide, it was a hard thing to get him through. And then he started having health issues, and he lived in Greenville. So that's about another 2 hours from where I live. So I was constantly up and down the road again, taking care of him with his health issues, staying in the hospital with him for weeks at a time when he had to be in the hospital. And through all of that, then, you know, there were marital issues that started coming up because I wasn't always home. No one was helping me with my dad, so I was handling that all by myself. So I was feeling the stress of that, and then not knowing what was going to become of his health issues. So because I was up and down the road all the time with him with his health issues, there were excessive absences to work to take care of my father but I had the leave time there, so that was okay. But it was still that excessive absence and not knowing what was going on at work and not being able to be there to take care of what you felt like needed to be taken care of. So that was a stressor. And then I had some health issues with my back, where I could hardly walk at certain times. So I was going through lots of back treatments, going through physical therapy. And then because of my father's health issues, and us having to deal with his congestive heart failure and the fact that he wasn't going to be able to be left alone anymore, I had to retire earlier than I had planned. I had planned to work for about another 3 years, but in August of 2018, I retired, took care of getting him moved into an assisted living facility, got him through the congestive heart failure, spending 21 days with him in the hospital and 21 days with him in rehab. And then but thank God he is doing well. He's in that assisted living facility still. He will be 93 this month, or he was 93 this month. His birthday was a week ago. And he still has a brilliant mind, is very feeble and weak because he only has 25% functionality in his heart. So that takes a toll on him, but he's doing very well considering. So with retirement came a loss of substantial income. By that time I was separated. So I had to worry about taking care of the whole household income myself. So there was a loss of substantial income, loss of a job, not knowing where it was going to go, what was going to happen, and then the legal separation and divorce on top of that. And so, just being unsure of the future, of employment, income, living situation, all of that just piled on top of me. And so at that point in time, it wasn't just the anxiety, it was pure depression. And there were days, or there were weeks, when I would go 4 or 5 days without showering, without eating, or just sleeping all the time. So I knew I had to get back to the doctor. So I went to the doctor, and he helped me find a very good therapist that was a Christian therapist. And I went to that individual, and she helped me so much, and helped me to realize you can't take on all that stuff at one time. You have to put it in a list, take the first thing on the list that's most important, deal with that, then get to the next thing. You can't try to take care of all of it at one time. So the therapist also put me on an additional medication, which I have now come off of, but I needed that so much. And going to the therapist once a week was like heaven to me, because I could open up and just lay everything out without anybody there saying, oh, you can handle it, it's not too much, things are going to get better, it doesn't rain forever. I mean, all those things that you hear, it just, putting it into perspective and really seeing what I can do something about, what's most important right now to take care of. And that was taking care of myself. Another thing that helped me out so much was, and I'll get to that in the next slide, but I'll stop right now. And so Darren and Steve, y'all have any comments?
Well, one comment I had, I know how much you love your children and your grandchildren, your 2 children and your grandchildren. So I'm sure they were a big help to you, weren't they, Norma?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and that's going to come on the next slide too. I had a lot of support, and so
Okay.
The support was great, and friends, wonderful friends.
Good.
Well, Norma, I just appreciate, you sharing your story. I guess we kind of lost touch. Here I served as your vice president, and my El Presidente is going through all this. I didn't know the extent. So I see a lot of really positive supportive comments in the chat, Norma. Thanking you for sharing, and I'll just add to that.
Yes.
All right. So the things that keep me going or kept me going during that time, really keep me going still today, is support from family and friends. That meant more to me than I can tell you. To know that I had friends that were there that I could call up and that they understood what I was going through, that could give me good guidance, that, you know, helped me be positive. And then my family, oh my gosh, my son and my daughter both called me every day. My daughter still calls me every day, and she says, "This is your daily checkup." So I mean, she has been absolutely wonderful. And then taking the medications as they were directed, that was huge. Continuing with therapy, getting out of the house. And one of my big things that I did every day was that I would go to my daughter's house, and my granddog, which I love very much, he would just love to see me every day. And, you know, that's unconditional love from a pet. And so I would go to her house and sit out in the backyard with him for hours, an hour, hour and a half, you know, as long as I could, as much time as I could fit it in my day. And the sunshine, believe it or not, sunshine does an awful lot for you mentally. And just getting out of the house and being with him, because he was so positive and loving and supportive, and, you know, being in the sunshine and just, you know, just being able to relax and think about things, that was awesome. The other thing is exercising. Exercising is one of the best things that you can do if you're going through a rough time. It helps your mind open up. It helps you think a little bit clearly. So if you don't exercise now, walking is one of the very best things that you can do. And then tackling one issue at a time. That was something that was hard for me because I am such a multitasker. And anyone in procurement kind of knows what I'm talking about. You got to be able to jump from one thing to the next. But taking one issue at a time was wonderful for me. And then setting a daily routine, like eating and sleeping, time outside, time to go to bed. So, you know, all of those things were things that I knew that I needed to do, and that I knew that, you know, and that's the thing, when you're depressed like that, I knew I needed to get up. I knew I needed to do something. I knew I needed to get outside. But even though you know it, you can't physically function that way. So anyway, that was very, very good for me for the therapist to help me get on a daily routine and be accountable to her for different aspects of what I was going through, different things I was doing.
Yeah. Well, Norma, you know, none of us have mentioned the pandemic. I guess that's so obvious and surrounding all of us, but have you been able to maintain your routine, your daily routine during the pandemic?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, that's one of the things I do. I walk, and if it's like when it was really scorching hot here, I have a exercise bike, and so I'd get on the exercise bike and I'd ride it for 45 minutes or an hour. So still keeping up with the exercising, and, you know, being able to tackle one issue at a time, and just staying on my medication, and then, you know, keeping to that daily routine. One of the things that happened with the depression was that, you know, you sleep all day long, and then when it comes nighttime, you're wide awake and you can't get back to sleep. So there was some sleep therapy that I did that helped me get my sleeping routine back in check, and all of that. So yeah, I've pretty much stuck with that. So thanks, Steve, for asking that.
You're welcome.
Norma, I think that you're getting out of the house and exercising, particularly during this COVID-19 that we're in, is more important than ever. You know, we try to get out of the house every day for a walk, especially here in Las Vegas, where it's now cooled down to like 111, maybe the cooler time of the evening. But the sunshine, I really, I agree, and appreciate your checklist. I'm going to keep this with me.
Well, Norma, I hope that you're doing a better job of watching where you're walking than I am. The other day, in fact, about 3 days ago, I was walking with my wife, Karen, and I stepped into a dip where the sidewalk had broken. And I'll just say that it's not easy on old men when you do that. But thank goodness I was able to I'm not old enough that I couldn't get my hands out in front of me. But so when you go walking, be careful if you're in our age group. Okay, well I guess it's time for questions. Justin, you just going to read those for us?
Yeah, Steve, we have a couple of questions in the queue, but we're running a little behind on time. So let's just skip and get to the questions when we conclude the presentation.
You want to do that? Okay, that's good. Okay. Well, now it's time for me to tell my story. And Norma, thank you for sharing yours. And I experienced some anxiety when I was growing up, and there were a lot of things going on there. One of them was, I think, a perfection complex. I always had to make sure I did everything right, and I got stressed out when I didn't. That was tough. And plus, as many of you know, I grew up in a minister's home, and it was like every day in a minister's home is Grand Central Station. So we always had to have the house, straightened, clean, dusted, and the whole bit. So I had a sort of a baseline of anxiety even during my childhood. And plus my father, in those days, ministers didn't make very much money. I watched him have to go out and preach what are known as revivals. Many of you don't have any idea what that is, just so he could bring in extra money. So I had some things going on as a child. In my family, on my mother's side, there is a definite history with depression. I had one cousin who tried to commit suicide. I had one cousin who was in and out of mental hospitals pretty much all of his life. And it was difficult to watch that. So the family history, we're going to talk more about the family history in a minute, but so there is a definite history in my family. I've had friends and acquaintances who have struggled. I'll just pull one out. It was the guy who was my college roommate. He had it made, came from a great home, great family. And he just literally, I noticed that he would start falling asleep in class. And long story short, he got a diagnosis of major depression. And thank goodness, through good care and good therapy and good medication, he was able to make it through it. He's doing fine now. And thank goodness for that. The next bullet, I say 3 employees. There actually were 4, but let me just talk about just a couple of those. I had one employee who, when I got there, she was one of the staff who I inherited, and I didn't realize until about 3 or 4 months after being there, just how severely depressed she was. And as I look back now, there's so much, I was kind to her, but there was so much more I wish I had known at the time to do for her. And, but in fairness to myself, a lot of the resources that are now available were just not available then. I had, there were 2 guys who worked for me, one who lost his child to suicide before he came to work for me. And I remember him telling me, he said, "Steve, there's nothing like losing your own child." And I don't want to be I don't want to be insensitive when I say that. But that made an impression on me. And secondly, there was an employee who lost his child while he was working with me. And that was that was, not good. But again, I tried to the best of my ability at that time to take good care of him and support him. But goodness, I wish I'd known then what I know now. And there was one other employee who worked for me who was not inherited. I had actually hired her, but it turned out she had some struggles with depression. And thank goodness, she's doing great now. It's so, there are happy endings. Well, my first breakdown, or again event, if you want to call it, in that was in late 2009, around November, as I recall it. And but there were things leading up to it, things that I'd noticed. But right in the weeks immediately before, I was literally seeing things and sensing things that were not there. Okay. You've heard the old people joke about the black helicopters. That's sort of where I was. And it kept getting worse and worse till at one night at work, I was staying late because I was going to give a talk to a department head and her staff. And, but I literally got on the phone and started telling my three children in individual phone calls how much I love them. And so I did that. And it wasn't long until I got a phone call from my wife. She said to me on the phone, "Stay right where you are. Do not move until I tell you to. And I'm coming to get you, and you're going to the hospital." So it was needless to say, that was not a pleasant experience, but thank goodness my children had called Karen and let her know that I had called them with that sentiment. I was voluntarily admitted to the hospital, and somebody asked a question earlier about suicide. I had entertained thoughts of suicide, but the good news is, and this is the good news, if you're ever dealing with someone who is contemplated suicide, is I didn't have a plan. It was just a thought. And so it was a good thing that we got checked in there. This first day was it was good. The unit I was in was very had very competent people in it and running it. And one of the things that I noticed very early on when I saw who my roommate was is I learned that depression can affect anybody. My roommate was a nuclear physicist with the Department of Energy. So I said, well, if it could hit him, it could hit me, it could hit any of us. So the guy who ran the unit there was a psychiatrist. I took him on as my psychiatrist, and he diagnosed me with major depression with psychotic features. You remember what I told you about seeing things, sensing things? So that was my diagnosis, which was concerning to the doctor, the psychiatrist, because it's tough to treat that. But I went on. He put me on medications, and at first, the medications didn't work too well, and we're going to talk more about this later. But I was literally, the cocktail wasn't right yet, and I was unable to even keep my balance when I would walk. I was frequently falling. So the psychiatrist put me on another medicine, and it was to counteract the falling. It was not good, because I came home and I saw snakes coming out of the tops of boots in my closet. So that's not a good experience. But the psychiatrist was great. He got things fixed. He got my cocktail, as they call it, right. And so things were good from that point. one thing that went bad was once I was released from the hospital, I I was given a list of therapists, psychologists with whom I could engage as a therapist. And just to put it in a nice way, the therapist was not a good fit for me. And I'm not saying she's not qualified, she's not competent, she just wasn't a good fit. And she recommended that I go back to work too soon. So when I went back to work, which was only, really a couple months later, um, I had another breakdown my first day on the job when I returned. So again, I mean, I was literally sitting there in my chair, frozen. If you can imagine, somebody being frozen, afraid. That's sort of how I was. And so I voluntarily admitted myself to the hospital and continued with the same psychiatrist. And I got when he gave me a diagnosis the second time, he said, this is much better because I had what is a more traditional form of depression, which is called depression with melancholic features. So that was good. And the stay there was good. The staff was great. Again, had a great roommate who had a very responsible position in the DC area. But this next one's going to may scare you a little bit. ECT stands for electroconvulsive therapy. And don't get in your mind the shock treatments that people normally think of. It's a very sophisticated procedure, and it's more commonly used now than you would realize. So they made the difference. That's the reason I was able to get out and to function. And the last thing is, having not picked the right psychologist the first time, there was an awesome social worker there, and I believe she was an intern, and she made sure that I got a good therapist the next time, and that therapist put me through the ropes. I was doing homework every night. Thanks to a really dear friend, I was able to enter the workforce softly, as I put it here, and it was at a place where I had previously worked at the beginning of my career, and I won't embarrass him by saying his name here. The guy who is the head of that office, but his initials are the same as the name Robert Griffin. So some of you may be able to figure out who that was. And thanks to being able to work at that place and to do actual work, I was able to have a position to go back into the workforce and to actually take a job in one of the greatest experiences of my life, which was running the graduate certificate program at Old Dominion University. And since then, I've been pretty good. It's, there are days, and I think, Norma and Darren will tell you there will always be days, but I'm doing okay now. Things that keep me going, my faith. I do take my meds regularly. I have occasional talk therapy. That's the fancy word for I go see a therapist. My family's been a huge support. My friends and professional peers have, and I'm retired now, and I try to do a balanced amount of volunteer work. I know now when to quit and not to take too much on. And finally, quiet time is always a good thing. Justin, we just want to keep going?
Yes, please.
Okay. Darren.
Thank you, Steve. And Norma might want to chime in as well. I just want to say thanks for the courage to tell your story. I've known you for over 25 years, and I knew that you were struggling at times. I didn't know the details. So Thanks for sharing that. I'm glad you found a good fit, both for the therapist and the cocktail. That's funny for you to use the term cocktail. All these years, I've never seen you take a drink other than soda pop.
That's it. And I still don't, but but so that's the only cocktail I've ever drunk. So I mean, I didn't drink it. I took it. Okay. Pills. Okay. But you're welcome, dear. I'm glad to share that. And
Okay, I'll go ahead and jump into my story and perspective. Again, this is just my story for what it's worth. And Justin, I know that we're probably getting down to the line for time with some other materials, so I'll try to be direct. So just, both sides, for my mother and my father, a history of substance abuse, some mental health issues that I really heard a little bit about as a kid, but didn't find out until later, and our families are a big influence, as we all know. I did lose my older brother as a child, something I still struggle with at times. And I think as a kid growing up, we didn't really talk about it. And I realized later that I was just repressing, my feelings, my anxiety, my grief. And it wasn't until well into my adult life that I was able to get a better hold of that. And that was through professional help. And no, Norma, I'm not laughing because there's anything to laugh about, but when you were talking about personal relationships, financial struggles, those are all very real. So I've experienced those as well, as you know. I remember getting divorced in my 30s. Out of the deal, I got the bicycle. I definitely got a nice 10-speed. And I had moved in with my parents in my 30s, and that's a little humbling. And but again, we each have our own story and our own struggle. Steve, I thought that my father wouldn't tell me what to do so much when I moved back, since I was in my 30s, but I was wrong about that. But I moved out at 16.
Yeah.
And also later in life, it hasn't been that many years ago, unexpected death of my mother. Cancer took her in a matter of 2 weeks, and it really pissed me off. I didn't know how to deal with that. How I chose to deal with it, I went to Mexico for 4 days on a bender, and that didn't, when I got home back to Portland, still had to deal with the same issues. And I really, through some people in my circle supported me and encouraged me to get professional help, which I did. And I felt like I got a really good therapist through our employee assistance program at Portland State. Up until that time, I had not really used EAP. I kind of used it as a, something happened, we have to send out a note to all employees about the EAP, but it really is a great resource that I encourage each of you. That's a great benefit, first of all, to have, and many, if not all, agencies provide some type of EAP. And anyway, I got a really good therapist that helped me deal with the death of my mother. And she told me one thing that in my first session about, she said, have you ever considered scheduling time to grieve for your mother? And I thought in my head, no, I'm not going to do that. That's ridiculous. I didn't say that, but in my mind, I just wasn't really willing to accept another idea, or, that I needed that. But that really helped me, and it helps me today to schedule a grieving time. There's a lot of good articles and research out there on the benefits of scheduling a quiet time. And that, again, helped me if you want to reflect through pictures, or my mom would always write a lot of cards. I have a box of cards from my mom. She never missed a birthday and anniversary. I mean, Steve, she was so good at sending cards. If you sent my mother a thank you card, she would send you one back thanking you for thanking her.
Darren, that was my father. My father was that same way. That's how I can relate. So, but you obviously loved your mother, and I think there are times when all of us have trouble. When it's the death of someone so close to us, we don't give ourselves time to grieve. So that's a great point that you made there. So how are you doing now? Do you feel like you're doing pretty good?
Yeah, I think I'm doing a lot better. I still need professional help at times. I think some other things in my life, that you deal with and you continue to deal with. I have a great support system, a great partner that always helps. But just this last year dealt with a younger family member's suicide, and that's still, something to struggle with, not just the loss of someone you love, but, the wondering, hey, I moved to California 5 years ago, did I kind of lose touch, and did I was I there? Could I have done more? Could I have offered a support or a resource? So that kind of hangs with me. But let's see. I got what's up next. Yeah, it's tough talking about my mom. I'll just tell our listeners that you might, on occasion, read a magazine called Government Procurement, and the column in the back. Steve's column's in the front, mine's in the back, but he's got the seniority, so you got to give him that.
Well, but at least I don't get you get a picture, Darren. I don't. So that I think that at least evens us out. So
Yeah,
okay.
Too. But anyway, but I wrote an article, Procurement Leaders Are Like Moms, and I talked a little bit about my mom, Jean Matthews. If anybody wants to read that, you can find it online at NIGP's website.
Yeah, it's a very moving story. It really is, and thank you for sharing that. And thank you for sharing your story. Norma, did you have any questions or comments for Darren? I guess not. So here's your next slide.
Okay. I just want to talk a little bit about dealing with anxiety when you're facing a situation where, you're experiencing panic or anxiety. Just some thoughts to keep. I actually got this from a work colleague, Steve, and also a UCLA grad. So a lot of good work being done at UCLA, including research on youth mental health. But anyway, this comes forward. It's called a method 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So when you're experiencing this, maybe pause, take some deep breaths, and that type of breath therapy can help you with some of the symptoms that I mentioned earlier. But acknowledging 5 things you see around you, whether you're indoors or outdoors, acknowledging 4 things you can touch around you. You can actually reach out and touch. Maybe that's your pet or your something around you. 3 things that you can hear, and if you really pause, I think you can hear. Maybe it's the UPS or the Amazon delivery person leaving you a new package. But those are some advice. And then the 2 things you can smell, acknowledge those, and then finally 1 thing you can taste. Just kind of go through that little checklist. I think it's really helpful, and this is proven. Maybe that taste is, for me, it's coffee, but it might be caramel macchiato. I don't really do those, but anyway, just some advice I thought we'd share with all of you for dealing with anxiety.
Yeah, those are great tips. Those are good ones. Really good.
Okay, depression can affect anyone. I want to share something quickly with you that's been in the media as of late. You'll see Dak Prescott there, quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys. And while I have a lot of great colleagues and customers in Texas, you might say, he's a Cowboys fan. No, I'm not a Cowboys fan, but I'm a big fan of this young man. And here's why. He sets a great example, including an example for our youth in this country. He talks about his family struggles in an interview here recently, his brother's suicide, his own experience with depression. He, just like everybody else, even though he's a famous football star, struggles with isolation during the pandemic. He admits to being vulnerable about it. And I think that's a good thing to be honest, that we all are human and we are vulnerable. And finally, his last quote, I think, is so powerful. I think it's huge to talk. I think it's huge to get help. Steve, if I had a T-shirt in support of mental health, I would put that on the T-shirt. I'd have to give Dak credit, of course.
Yes.
What he's saying there, I think, is such a good message.
Yes, it is. And I just have the greatest admiration, as I know most of us do, even though I'm not a Cowboys fan. So that's, living in the DC area. But Darren, thank you for sharing that about Dak. That's awesome. Yes.
And then one thing to share real quickly, this comes from the University of Rochester Medical Center. Just some things to think about in talking about suicide. Again, I'm not an expert in this area, so that's why I'm going to a professional source here. And just some things to keep in mind if you're going to talk about suicide with somebody. I think to ask is really important. And Steve, that might be the toughest because growing up, for me, you have to be a tough guy. You can't talk about these things. You can't ask about them. And I think that we need to. You also, the individual, a family member, a loved one, keep them safe. Maybe they need a place to stay, a roof over their head. Be there for them whenever you can. Help them connect to resources. Have those resources available. Of course, they have to take a step and make the call, if you will. And I think we have some hotlines here that people have been sharing on the chat.
Right.
I always wish that I had done a better job with all of these things, honestly.
Sure.
And then the follow-up, it's not a one-time, hey, I checked in and I'm good to go. that follow-up, I think, is important, that they know you're there, they know you care, they know you're a resource. And that's why, Norma, I appreciate your daughter calling you every day for your check-in. There's no better follow-up than that.
Yes, that's great. You know, and in helping someone through this kind of situation, Darren, it's not as easy as this slide might lead people to believe. But these are things, very, very good things for us to remember. Norma. Norma.
Steve, I'm wondering if Norma might
Sorry, no, I was on mute. Sorry.
That's right.
I'm just talking away. Sorry about that. We wanted to give you some practical tips for helping someone with anxiety. And the best thing that you can do is educate yourself about anxiety. We're going to give you some links where you can go to a little bit later that will help you understand anxiety a little bit better. And then help people to break free of avoidance behavior, because people that have anxiety, they tend to want to be by themselves because they don't want anybody to see, especially if they have a strong personality, they don't want anybody to see that they have anxiety. You know, that's not them. They don't have anxiety. And then destigmatize that for the person. If they have anxiety, let them know it's okay. You know, that everyone experiences anxiety sometimes, and sometimes it's worse for others, and that there's no shame in getting help for that. Then be aware that the reassurance seeking trap, you know, don't give that reassurance so much that, you know, that they lean on you as a crutch, but they get the right type of help. Help them know the sources that they can go to. And then these are very similar to what Darren said. Be physically present with the person. Make sure that you call and check in on them and see how they're doing. And, you know, just to be maybe that bright spot in that person's life or for that day. Help them concentrate on slow breathing. That was another one that Darren had mentioned. And then watch them, just see what they find that is calming to them and help them to get more in that calming mode by maybe pointing them to those activities. And then the most important thing that you can do is help them realize that getting checked out medically is going to be the very best thing that they can do. And sometimes they do need a second opinion. And it's okay to even ask the medical professional that you're with, you know, should I seek a second opinion? So I think all of those are things. And then Psychology Today is a good article, and there's a link to it on the web, on the slide.
Okay. Darren?
Okay, I just wanted to quickly share with folks about some risk factors for depression. And again, another great resource and a web link down at your slide, which I believe our NIGP folks or national staff can provide all this information. The American Psychiatric Association, it's interesting, Steve, that normally we're citing NIGP or other professional resources or the dictionary of procurement terms, and today it's much differently. But as you can see, I won't go into all of these, but just something that we want to offer to you as a resource: the biochemistry, certain chemicals in the brain contributing to symptoms, the genetics about depression running in families. I mentioned my own story there. Personalities, things like low self-esteem, we can be overwhelmed by stress, and then environmental factors, exposure to violence, neglect, abuse, poverty. You could be more vulnerable, or a person could, to depression. So just keep these things in mind. And again, I encourage you to check out the resources here.
Okay. Norma? Norma, are you on mute?
I thought I had unmuted myself. I didn't click hard enough. Sorry. What you can do for yourself is learn about anxiety and depression. I think that's what we need to do, not just for ourselves, but for others. Seek treatment if your condition worsens. I knew that when I was, that I had anxiety, but when I got into the depressed state, I knew that I needed to get more help than I already had. And then if suicide crosses your mind, seek help immediately. That's nothing to play around with. Do what your professional is advised. Take care of yourself. And that's the number one thing. Take care of yourself. Because if you can't take care of yourself, you certainly can't take care of anyone else. And be patient with yourself. So, you know, eating right, exercising, get enough quality sleep, and avoiding alcohol. Those were things that, that I did for myself. Also, the Mayo Clinic, there was a supporting a family member or a friend. It is adapted from the Mayo Clinic. And if you are looking for help in helping a family member or a friend, there's a great article there.
Okay, well, so how is depression treated? We've talked about this, I think, between Norma and me. And as you see there, it's medication and therapy and the ECTs that I talked about. But again, as Norma just said, if you're experiencing any symptoms of depression or anxiety, the first thing you need to do is, and if it gets bad enough, just talk to your physician or a psychiatrist and have them check you out. And the good news, which I stated earlier, is that the overwhelming majority of people who are diagnosed with depression do overcome it. We've touched on this already also. It may take you more than once to find the right psychiatrist. Fortunately, I had no issue with that. The medications I talked about, and the therapist I talked about. So those, we won't belabor that. Norma?
Okay, so how to support someone else. Learn the symptoms of anxiety, encourage them to seek treatment, identifying the signs of worsening anxiety or depression, understand the suicide risks. Even though someone might not be talking about suicide, the suicide risk is there. So just like my doctor had to ask me, I have to ask you this question. Maybe that's a question that we need to ask if we notice that someone's going through that. Stay alert for the warning signs of suicide, like if they're starting to get things in order that they normally wouldn't, just different things like that. And then provide support. And again, there's the link for the Mayo Clinic.
Okay, Darren mentioned earlier that we were going to provide you some resources. And Darren, you pointed out that the first one to go to is your employee assistance program, if you have one. Great resource. And there are some national organizations. I've listed 3 national organizations there. And finally down there, I've listed a regional organization with which I've done some volunteer work, a great organization, PRS Inc., and which, among other things, is tied into the National Suicide Hotline as one of its providers, if you will. If you look down here at that green link, there's a little video about PRS, and I would encourage you to check it out. And it's impressive to see that there are people who are out there. Now, the oldest of the national groups is NAMI. It's probably the oldest and the largest. It was literally founded around a kitchen table by parents who were concerned about their children. So these are some good resources. They aren't all the resources, but these are some good ones for you to consult. And just a wealth of services, support services, just check them out. Well, look at there, Justin. We allowed 8 minutes for questions. That's better than I thought. Okay.
Definitely. And if anybody has any questions, please input those in the question. Like Steve mentioned, we have a short time for questions. So if we don't answer any, we'll be able to answer those after the fact and send those out to everybody that registered. So our first question, Norma mentioned that people often hide their struggles with mental health issues. I believe that drug and alcohol abuse are caused by these same issues. Do you have any statistics that show a correlation?
No, I don't have any statistics, but I do believe that if you have those issues, that drugs and alcohol can exacerbate them. So they can make them much worse than what they already are. So if you have those feelings that something isn't right, maybe that's a time for you to consider, hey, maybe this is a time for me not to have access to those things, and ask someone to help you avoid them. And that would be the information that I would give. But I don't have statistics.
Thanks, Norma. How do you suggest getting help from someone that is in denial?
Who is that directed to any of us? Just a
Sure,
general
to the
question.
panel. Yeah.
Just to the panel as a whole. Well, obviously it's not easy, but you have to obviously be someone that the person trusts, or you need to have someone that the person trusts approach them, and it's not easy, but it's all based on approach. And Darren went through approaches earlier, and approach people in the right way. Be careful that you say the right things, don't say the wrong things, and ask the right questions. And but I'm a big one to answer. I'm just to talk here. I didn't ask anyone for help until I literally broke. So I'm probably not qualified to answer that question. Darren, you have anything?
That's a tough one, Steve, to find, the right connection and the person that that's trustworthy and that you're able to connect with. And I have had individuals with those tendencies and maybe exhibit some of those myself. I might have to chew a little bit on that and do some follow-up as well. I think that's it, but I think it's a great question.
Yeah. Norma, anything?
No, I think that's a tough one as well. The main thing is that you see it, and that if you don't feel like you're the appropriate person, maybe get in touch with someone else that may be closer to that person, that could, tackle that delicate question. But just getting them to sit down and talk about things sometimes will open them up enough so that you can talk to them.
What would you suggest to those that may not have friends or family to talk to?
Probably the first thing I would suggest is there's all sorts of support and resources to those organizations that I listed, back on this slide right here. And where you can call, and they have people that you can call and talk to, and that's important. Talk therapy. This is not even necessarily, you're not seeing a psychologist or any other type of therapist, but they have not just the hotlines for suicide, but there are people there. If you're experiencing an anxiety attack or a depression episode, you call one of these organizations, and I encourage you to check out each of these organizations. And that's in today's world where we're so isolated, particularly with the pandemic, that's probably your best place to go. I know not to advertise NAMI, but they have, goodness, I think 500 chapters, something like that, across the country. So not only do you have the national organization that provides support, but the local and regional chapters too, and also groups like PRS. If you're in the like in the Northern Virginia area, definitely they're a place for you to call.
And Steve, I think that's a great resource. Maybe easier to reach out to a national professional organization anonymously, if either you choose to or you don't have a friend or family member to reach out to. A great resource. I think my mom's article that I mentioned was July of 2016 or thereabouts.
Yeah,
that was just a question. So
yeah, no, that's good. Norman, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think you guys covered it.
Yeah. Okay.
And we have time, I think, for one more question. How do you know you found a good doctor? Meaning, what's a reasonable amount of time before you start feeling better?
Now I have to go back in history. I know after my first episode, the doctor was trying to get the cocktail drug cocktail medication. Let's use that word cocktail right. It took several weeks, and there were some challenging moments in the meantime. And I won't get into all the gory details, but don't expect instantaneous results. But if you have a good psychiatrist, a good doctor, they will help you through it. The statistics do show that.
I think one thing is that they're empathetic to your what you're going through, and that they are serious about finding you the assistance that you need, and take the time to sit down and talk with you. Most doctors rush through their appointments in 15, 20 minutes, but you know, when your physician sits down with you for 30 minutes to talk about what's going on in your life, that they really care about what's going on. And if you don't feel like the doctor is correct, then ask him, is there someone that he could refer you to that, you know, that is it deals with that specifically, I think.
Darren, do you have anything quickly to add to that?
I'm just going to note that one of our attendees has put the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline in the chat, so we'll make sure and get that out to our attendees as well. No, I just want to say thanks to both of you and to everyone and to NIGP for having the discussion.
Well, and I'll just add my thanks to you, Darren, and to you, Norma, and to our audience for hanging in there. I know this was not an easy subject for you to sit through, but hopefully we have provided you some benefit. And Norma?
Yeah, I wanted to thank everybody as well, and thank you and Darren. It's been too long since we've done something like this together, so I was very excited for us to all get together again. I hope that in some way that the presentation has brought some information to individuals, and if there's ever anything that any of us can do for you, our email addresses are in the presentation, so feel free to reach out to us at any time. So even if, and I know I saw some comments about not having anyone to speak with, if you don't have anyone to speak with, I know that that any of us three would be willing to be that person that you could go to and talk to.
Absolutely is right. Okay.
I too would like to thank our panel. I hope everyone enjoyed this webinar. Please take time to fill out the evaluation survey. A link containing the survey and a recording of this webinar will be emailed to everyone tomorrow. Thanks and have a great day.
Thank you all.
Yes, indeed.